So, I would like to welcome you here at the second panel discussion. And let's start with the key words of our discussion in the afternoon. Some of them you have already heard, just like decarbonization or carbon neutrality. And we have already heard some information about renewable sources and nuclear energy. And in this panel discussion, we will talk about the short-term and long-term responses of the energy sector. Because it's a really tough question. How can we reduce the carbon emission during that period when the consumption is increasing again? And until 2040, the electricity consumption will be bigger by roughly 45%. But before turning to the first presenter, I'd like to introduce the panelists. First, Michel Barthelemy from the OECD now. Okay.
Non,
Yeah.
alors Michel, il interviendra demain matin.
Okay.
Yes, you can say
Yeah,
it.
I'm going to ask for him. The first presenter will be Bernard de Ripia, President of Belgian Energy Forum. I hope I introduced your name perfectly. Mr. Guy Beckham from UK, Head of the Generation Policy at EDF Energy. Mr. Kalemets from Estonia. Hello, who is the co-founder of and CEO of Fermi Energy. Also, Eric Mocour from Sauvons le Climat from France, who is the president of this association. Stéphane Serrat, who is the deputy director of CEA from France, which is the Nuclear Association Commission for nuclear and alternative energy sources. And that, not at last, but I'd like to introduce also from Finland, Tiina Tuomela, who is Deputy General Director of Fortum. So before starting the presentations, I'd like to turn to Mr. Barthelemy. And just before his hearing, I would like to say some words about the cost of decarbonization. Yeah.
Vous m'excuserez, c'est pas contre toi évidemment. Michel Barthelemy, je lui ai proposé d'intervenir demain matin. D'abord parce que nous avons un problème. Yes, but I propose to him a change. Yes, because pour deux raisons. D'abord parce que nous devons être à 7 heures dans les bus pour partir à l'ambassade de France, mais je pense que le coût de la décarbonisation sera beaucoup plus intéressant à écouter demain après la table ronde sur les énergies décarbonées qu'avant de nous dire des choses. On va déjà écouter les industries décarbonées et ensuite nous aurons l'étude de l'OCDE. Donc demain matin, à la première heure, avant la troisième table ronde, Michel, c'est toi qui causeras. Voilà, un grand merci.
Well, thank you. Sorry, I have no information about this. In this case, we are just skipping to the next presenter. And actually, we know that in Europe, in many countries, nuclear power plants, nuclear energy is still a basic of the electricity generation. If we mention Belgium, for example, we know that the electricity generation, more than 50%, is produced in nuclear power plants. But because of the decision of the government, these nuclear power plants will be shut down in 2025. And my first question is that how can the energy sector will cope with this 6 gigawatt loss of electricity, and how can you use other sources instead of the nuclear, and what will be the climate, economic and social impact of this decision? You might reopen coal-fired plants like in Germany? Thank you.
Okay, well, okay, it works, I think. So indeed, the Belgian government has decided in 2003 already to phase out nuclear fleet in 2025. And in March last year, the government has approved the Energy Pact with a plan to phase out our nuclear power plant between 2022 and 2025. But the replacement alternatives are not constructed yet, or even not clearly decided. And also, we should know that the Belgian federal government is currently only dealing with current affairs. So it's not a good moment to make such important and strategic decision about the energy. So it's a real challenge for me to make a clear statement today on what will be the energy mix in Belgium without, well, government and without clear decision. But let's discuss about the option we have. You mentioned about reopening coal-fired power plants in Belgium. Well, it's totally in opposition with the commitment of the government to fight against climate change and against the or to lower the carbon emission. So reopening the coal-fired power plant is not an option in Belgium. Also, well, the government continue to work on renewable source of energy with wind turbine and solar energy, but it's not enough to replace 6 gigawatts, and certainly when there is no wind or no sun. Then you look at the gas-fired power plant and nuclear power plants. The comparison is clearly in favor of nuclear. The units and the power plants are already there. Of course, in terms of long-term operation or extending lifetime of the plant, you need investment. But then you look at the CO2 emission. Thanks to nuclear, you could save about 7 million tons of CO2 emission, thanks to nuclear, compared to gas. So gas could be part of the solution, but it's more expensive and less environmentally friendly. So what could be the negative impact of the phase out? I speak about CO2 emission, that's for sure, but also the security of supply and the electricity prices, with doubling the electricity production cost by 2050 in case of phase out. Belgium is also well known as a nuclear hub, well recognized nuclear hub, with important nuclear know-how, not only for what concerns energy, but also in all application of the nuclear technology. And the risk of losing this know-how is also important and needs to be considered with the phase out of nuclear. With an impact also on the employment. The Belgian nuclear sector employs today 20,000 people, more or less, whether to exploit existing nuclear application or to work on the innovation of tomorrow. A nuclear phase out could potentially result in the loss of 7,000 jobs, direct jobs, and create certainly a nuclear brain drain in the long run, with negative impact on the whole Belgian nuclear industry. About the interconnection capacity, we should also be or remain very careful about that. Today, Belgium roughly imports 10% of its electricity. In case of phase out, we should import about 38%. The neighboring countries are facing, for some of them, the same situation as Belgium. And also, it's important for Belgium to remain strategically non-dependent on the imports. So that's for the impact, negative impact, and the different option of the sector. To have a complete view, on Belgium, it's also important to listen to the Belgian citizen. And quite recently, the Belgian Nuclear Forum launched quite representative opinion polling, showing that the number of supporters of maintaining nuclear energy beyond 2025 has increased by more than 50% between 2017 and today, with 46% of Belgian survey are in favor of maintaining nuclear beyond 2025. And this percentage could increase up to 70% if the Belgian survey would have been convinced that nuclear is a low carbon energy. Well, we are all convinced, but back to the comment of earlier today about communication, I think we still have some room and work to do as a sector to better explain the role of nuclear in low carbon emission. Interesting result also of this survey is that roughly 63% of the Belgians are in favor of construction of new nuclear power plant in Belgium. Also, some independent experts and more experts warn the fact that it's probably too late today to phase out with the absence of any replacement alternative. So the Belgian Nuclear Forum strongly hopes that the new or future federal government will review its position about nuclear exit. And our recommendation or conviction, of course, of the Belgian Nuclear Forum is to maintain nuclear in the energy mix by considering long-term operation with lifetime extension of some units. And why not? It's maybe a quite disruptive topic of discussion in Belgium in the current political context, but why not relaunch the discussion about new build program, listening to the Belgian citizen, taking into account new technologies, and we mentioned several times today the SMR, on which, well, the nuclear sector worldwide actively works. So that's for Belgium, more or less.
Thank you very much. As we heard, so the situation is not very easy in your country, and I have been visited both of your nuclear power plants, Tihange and Doel, and so yes, you're right. If there's a phase out, it's not a really, it's a very difficult way to get back on the track with nuclear energy. So we will see in future what will happen in your country. Okay, now I would like to mention another example in connection with the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom has promoted a diverse carbonized mix to meet its needs, and at Hinkley Point in Somerset they are building 2 new European pressurized water reactors. They are under construction, but we also heard information about that there are delays in the project, and also the financing of the project is much beyond than it was planned before. We also know that there is a so-called contract for difference with the government and the company itself. But my question is that will this situation could lead to the bigger price for the consumers, or will it be bigger for the taxonomy? Will it be the price bigger for the British taxpayers? Please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, just to reassure you, the cost to the taxpayer and to the consumer won't go up. But let's put this into some context. First of all, I'm from EDF Energy. We're the largest low carbon generator in the UK. We operate the UK's existing nuclear plants, As you just heard, we're building Hinkley Point C along with our partners. We also have a growing fleet of onshore and offshore wind, so we're involved in all forms of low carbon generation. Now, the UK has long been a leader on climate change, back to the UK's 2008 Climate Change Act, which set a target of 80% reduction by 2050 on 1990 levels. We're halfway there, but of course that's the easy half. And the biggest driver of that has been the very big reductions in emissions from the power sector. And how has the power sector reduced? Well, coal, which used to be the major source of electricity, is now down to just 5% of production. And within a few years, by 2025 at the latest, it will be eliminated altogether. Nuclear has stayed pretty much steady at around 20% of the mix over the last 30 years, but renewables have grown so that they're now something like a third of the total generation. And the cost of renewables has come down very, very sharply. We saw recently in an auction for contracts for difference, offshore wind at just £40 a megawatt hour. Now, last year, the UK government sought advice from its advisors, the Committee on Climate Change, about long-term emissions targets, and the CCC made the recommendation in May of a net zero target for 2050. And just a month later, in June, the UK Parliament passed legislation to put that in place. So on some things, the UK Parliament can make a quick decision, if not on Brexit. There's a lot to be done, though, to get the policies in place to make that happen. What does it mean for the power sector? Well, first of all, electricity demand has fallen in recent years, but in order to decarbonise the economy, there will be substantial electrification needed, particularly in areas like transport and in heat, where the UK is very much dependent on natural gas at the moment. So the Committee on Climate Change projects a doubling of electricity demand by 2050. That means the need, I think, for all forms of low carbon generation and plenty of room for all of them to grow. We'll need to reduce our reliance on gas-fired generation and eventually eliminate it. The Committee on Climate Change saw scope for significant increases in intermittent renewables, but they weren't prepared to go beyond around 60%. They would be confident could be met by intermittent renewables. And I think, Michelle, you'll talk tomorrow, will probably give some good explanations of some of the reasons why they could come to that conclusion. They identified a need for firm low-carbon power. And in the UK, that really tends to point towards either nuclear or gas plants with CCS. Now, our existing nuclear fleet, much of it will come to the end of its generating life during the 2020s. And of the existing plants, only Sizewell B would be left after that. And that's not for policy reasons, it's that they will technically reach the end of their generating life. So we need to build new. As we said, we're building Hinkley Point C, supported by a contract for difference. It took a long while to get through the political and commercial negotiations that got us started. But it is now being built, and I hear often talk about delays and problems. At the moment, that project is going well. This year we achieved one of the first key milestones called J0, which was the point when for the first unit we completed the underground work and were ready to start building above ground. So that is on track. The last review of the project said that there is a risk of delay, but at the moment I know the project team are working hard to keep to the target of delivering the first unit by the end of 2025. And yes, the cost has gone up from the estimate in 2016. There are a couple of reasons for that. One is, as with many civil engineering projects, it turned out that ground conditions were not quite as good as we hoped. The cost of some of that work was greater than expected. And secondly, we had to take full account of all the costs of a first-of-a-kind project and adapting the EPR design to fit British standards. So yes, there's an increase of somewhere between 1.9 and 2.9 billion on the original estimate. That will not affect the consumer, it will not affect the UK taxpayer. That reduces the profit for the developers. That's what the contract for difference means. It fixes a price with some fairly limited conditions under which that price can be changed. However, I think it's worth noting from the consumer's point of view, there is a price to be paid for that, which is that any developer who's going to take all the risk needs to look for a substantial rate of return in order to make it worth taking on that risk. And actually, I think that the thinking in the UK is moving on to recognise that perhaps actually the consumer might be better off accepting some of the risk, because that way you can look at delivering projects with a much lower cost of capital. And for nuclear, which is capital intensive, and with large nuclear, it's a long construction process, the cost of capital is the biggest single driver of the cost to the consumer. So if you can reduce the cost of capital, you will reduce the costs. And it is worth taking on some of that risk. That's why we're now looking, and the UK government has consulted on a different form of financing through, it's called a regulatory asset-based model, as a potential way that the next project, which is Sizewell C, could be supported. Now, Sizewell C has the potential to be a much, much lower cost project than Hinkley. And there are two key reasons for that. One is we will replicate the design of Hinkley. That means there are no new design costs. It means we can use the experience gained from Hinkley, and it means that we can probably take 20% off the construction costs. But on top of that, there is a much bigger prize to be won if we can deliver at a lower cost of capital. And we know that there are private sector investors, institutions, pension funds, insurance companies, etc., who would be prepared to invest in new nuclear with the right conditions. Now that's a challenge, because they are concerned about the long time between when they invest and when they start to get money. They are concerned about taking on some of the remote but very high impact risks, and that means looking at the right package that helps to take some of those risks away from them and give them the opportunity to invest. That's what we're working on next, and I very much hope that that will mean that we can move ahead with Sizewell C as the next part of new nuclear in the UK.
Thank you very much for your words. Well, actually, it was good to hear that Hinkley Point C is in good progress. As it was mentioned earlier, there are quite a lot of mayors here from different European countries, and they also had a chance to visit Hinkley Point C. And most of the mayors are also from Hungary, my home country. And as it was also mentioned during today, we are also starting the process of constructing a nuclear power plant. And the UK can be also a good example that the developed countries are also planning on nuclear energy. And I think these examples can help other countries in future. If I continue with this line, I would like to turn to Mr. Kalamets, who's coming from Estonia. And as far as I know, Estonia hasn't operated energetic nuclear reactors in the past. But if I'm informed well, you have created a company or an association which brings together professionals and scientists and businessmen, and possibly in further future you are interested in small modular reactors to be operated and just changing oil shale or coal plants in future. Am I right?
Yeah, more or less. Thank you. Yes, my name is Kalev, and I'm from the Pikkuveli of Suomi, Viro, or Estonia, down to the south, where we have much more sun than in Finland. So I will go to the larger picture or larger problem that I presented also in the International Atomic Energy Agency conference. And the problem is that, yes, in Europe we will have a sharp decline of nuclear very soon, happening This Christmas in Switzerland, one unit will go down 370, and in Ringholz one will go down. Next year we'll have French 2 older units likely to shut down, and then again shutdowns in Germany, shutdowns in Ringholz 2, and then we have the HERs going down, then further units going down in Spain, in Belgium. So in total, and at the same time, what we have happening, I can't show the slides, but what we have happening is the coal phase-outs, which is positive. And what impacts my country, where we have for 100 years mined and burned oil shale, which is the nastiest fuel. You can better burn cow dung than oil shale, because the oil shale has 50% ash content. But we have been quite successful in that, burning that dung from the 480 million years old. But it emits copious amount of CO2, and the CO2 price has really gone up to 25, 27 euros, meaning that the oil shale power generation has declined by 60% this year, within 12 months, meaning that when we were net exporter, Estonia, by 2 terawatt-hours to Latvia and Lithuania, which are in deep deficit, then this year we're importing, net importer from, obviously from Finland, who's importing in turn from Sweden and Russia with love. And so what is happening in Northern Europe is by 2026, we will shut down dispatchable capacities in generation, all combined 260 terawatt-hours dispatchable capacity. So what has been true in the past, that the interconnections give us the security of supply, it doesn't anymore. Everybody has been lying to themselves that renewables will be supplying security of supply. It won't. It's like with Donald Trump. The lies will come to roost. There will be an impeachment. The Brexit will be a problem for UK. And other things, if you keep lying to yourself, you will have the RMBK exploding, or Soviet Union going upside down. So I believe that the big lie of renewables securing Europe will also come to roost. And fundamentally, in Estonia, yes, we have a lot of wind and also a lot of land. But guess what? We have the same situation as in Germany. The people just don't want the windmills anymore. Also in Norway, this is a situation happening, that the people just don't want the windmills anymore. And what the reality of windmills is that you have to replace it every 20 years. So, and at the same time, we have the unfortunate thing that all the large reactor new builds, they have been, politely said, unsuccessful. 2 companies in Europe and United States, not on South Korea and Japan and Russia, of course, but in Europe and US, for many reasons that have been discussed, 2 companies have been restructured. Areva, well known here, Olkiluoto 3, the troubles, and hopefully fuel will be loaded next year. But Areva was broken down, and Westinghouse was in Chapter 11. It was rescued by Canadians, for God's sakes. It's almost as humiliating as Finns buying over Uniper. So.